God, I was diagnosed with avoidant personality disorder. Long story short, it has destroyed any chance of having relationships with people as I am in a constant state of panic when in social situations and I have a massive inferiority complex. Psychiatrists tell us that one with social anxiety, avoidant personality should face their fears, but I have found that to just give me more anxiety and bring about more feelings of despair and inadequacy. Every time I attend a social gathering, I think about all the inappropriate, weird things I said during the conversation for days after the event. I am tortured by these thoughts. What do I do? When psychiatrists say face your fears, um, sometimes although it's accurate, it is not always skillful to say that because when we say face your fears, when you're living like that, you're being bombarded by thoughts and feelings and sensations, you as awareness, so to speak. You're being bombarded by that. So to turn towards that can be overwhelming if you're not doing it with skill. This is why we break experience up into pieces of words, pictures, feelings, and sensations. When a psychiatrist says face your fears, it's like they're saying just face all that now. But that's too much. To deconstruct it is more skillful. So, for example, to do that in a controlled, safe space at first, in a session where someone is guiding you to say, for example, when you're feeling um, let's say you go to a social gathering and you're leaving and then you have this story that says, I said things that are weird, I was inappropriate. That kind of thing, just that program can be looked at. So as you pull away from that social gathering, just say, I didn't say anything inappropriate. And now you're not witnessing all of your fear at once. See, which would be overwhelming. You're just looking at this particular story. And when you're looking at it, you're just looking at it at one thought at a time. So it's not overwhelming. So so looking at the people at the party in your awareness after you're in a safe space, I didn't say anything inappropriate. Here it comes. You can see the thoughts that are creating anxiety. Can you watch each one at a time? So staying with it, and you might want to use like tapping if it's creating a lot of anxiety at first and difficult to do as you're watching the thoughts that come up and say, I said something inappropriate or this or that. Resting with one thought at a time. If you can just be with it and allow it fully, the thought, until it comes to rest, and then rest as awareness for a moment, feeling into the body and allowing that. And then the next thought in the series, being that deliberate with it because to avoid overwhelm, to still work through it, but avoid being scared to continue. So repeat that again. I didn't say anything inappropriate. Keep watching one thing at a time. If it gets too sticky, if something comes up that's really sticky or panic producing, again, with that one thought, you may want to just notice the thought and return to tapping and rest there for a bit. And then return to that thought briefly and rest there with the tapping again. That has a way of sort of providing more space with a panicky thought. Or if a thought is up there and you're not able to witness it because it's too much, trace the space around the thought. So if there's a thought of being at the party and saying something inadequate or inappropriate, there's a picture of that, for example, or words around it that say, I really fucked up. Whatever that is, if it's really sticky and it's difficult to turn towards it, trace the space around it. So from awareness, look at the space right outside the words or the image and trace that space around the words with awareness in one direction several times and then switch directions and go the other way. That can really diffuse a scary thought so that it's easier to rest with it. Use those tricks at first to be able to move through the inquiry further. Anything that you're believing can be reversed here, and that's what I'm encouraging you to do. So, I don't know exactly what the beliefs are, but you have to find them for yourselves. Like when you're around people, Just ask yourself, what am I believing? When you pull away from them, what am I believing? Write it down. I'm believing that I don't belong. I'm believing that they're judging me. I'm believing whatever else. And then reverse those. They're not judging me. Yes, they are. Be with each thought one at a time. Same way. Repeat it, and you can even say utility inquiry. What do I get out of believing that they're judging me? I must get something because I keep thinking it. What do I get out of that? It keeps me safe. It tells me not to go out, be with people, whatever else. Witness those thoughts one at a time. Be very painstaking about this to really look at each thought and reverse it. As you do this work more and more, you should start to recognize the awareness more and more. So, again, going into these programs and reversing them and letting the body adjust accordingly can begin to have you settle in as awareness more. As it does, then you may want to do some deeper somatic work because even though psychiatrists will say like avoidant personality disorder, I am not a psychiatrist and I don't dole out diagnoses. Sometimes when people are diagnosed, it's helpful then because we can find out from the diagnosis what is actually being said here by the behavioral health field when they say avoidant personality. Because if you break it down, what's actually happening is that you're believing certain things and identifying with certain stories or programs. And that's what shows up then as what a clinician would say avoidant personality disorder. But that diagnosis doesn't point you directly to what you're believing. So, in some sense, we have to leave the diagnosis behind and look at what is bringing fear up for you. What programs are you believing? And then reverse those programs, seeing all the thoughts. But so it's not just that the diagnosis isn't particularly helpful in direct experience because it doesn't point to what you're believing. It's also sometimes the diagnosis is a cover up job for something that happened to you. So, like when we're young, something can happen where we start to believe these things about ourselves. It becomes part of our identity. Maybe there was a relationship or relationships in your early life that were traumatic or something. Something happened where I don't know because I'd be guessing. But sometimes when we're diagnosed with something and it looks like there's just this current thing going on, like, oh, I'm just avoiding this or that, or I'm panicking around this or that, to trace that back to something in your childhood, but not to do therapy on it, but to deconstruct it. Because if you don't deconstruct it, it's always going to be there, this trauma contributing to the anxiety. So part of the skillfulness is being able to pull up that trauma and dismantle that. But I would not suggest that unless you have the skill for it. Like you're with someone that has that kind of skill, deconstructive inquiry. You can do it on your own, but working with trauma can be quite overwhelming. I wouldn't suggest it in this situation. So, what I would say is start out by doing these reverse inquiries and spending a few weeks where you're just immersed in those inquiries and you're not overwhelming yourself by thinking about or facing all of your fears at once. You're doing one program at a time through reverse inquiry and then witnessing one thought at a time, resting as awareness between the thoughts. Do that for a while. And if it starts to help you, but yet there's some aspect of the anxiety that still feels out of reach, do a session with me or one of the facilitators on my site, killaby.com, because they're going to be able to hold the space and take you deeper into something that you can't see. And if that happens to be trauma, they've got the skill to kind of work through that, help you dismantle that. So when a psychiatrist says face your fear, it's like saying go to the cocktail party and just deal with it. But that's really difficult for people to do. Sometimes we can do that and face the fear. But if you can face the fear this way, through inquiry, seeing what it's made of, letting everything fall away like that, that's facing your fear very directly because your fear is actually not out there. So when psychiatrists say, just face your fear, go to the party, it's like in that is an assumption that somehow my fear or my suffering is out there in the party. And if I can just go to the party, then I'll face it. But our fears are internal. Our programs are occurring to interior awareness. So when you walk into the cocktail party, it's how you're interpreting that through words, pictures, feelings, and sensations, including how you're identifying who you are and who other people are. That's the source of your anxiety. It can all be found in interior awareness, meaning from awareness you can see words, pictures, feelings, and sensations. To me, that's what it means to face our fears, is to turn awareness towards these words, pictures, feelings, and sensations. Trying to see if there's anything else. Mainly, I'm just saying find out what you believe and reverse it. And there wasn't a lot in your, because you talked about diagnoses, there's not a lot there for me to see what you're actually believing. But when you can't be in a social situation and you have a massive inferiority complex, we call that a deficiency story. Everybody's got them. You have to you have to start naming that. So this is the problem with these clinical terms, massive inferiority complex, because it doesn't point to what you actually believe or identify with. So when you're feeling that massive inferiority complex, what's happening that is in the mirror of relationship with other people in social situations, you're continuously identifying yourself as a deficiency story. Like, I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not safe. There's something wrong with me. Learn how to use the boomerang so that anytime you feel that way in relationship, you automatically just boomerang that back. So let's say you go to the store and you're having a conversation with someone, it's really awkward. You feel panicky. When you go out into your car, put the person up in your awareness and ask, what deficiency story comes up here? Oh, I'm not good enough. Go into inquiry. Say the opposite. I'm perfect as I am. No, you're not. So now you can see the thoughts that make up the identity. Stay with them. Stay with them and repeat. I'm perfect as I am. Observe each one at a time. Coming down to the body to feel any big feelings that come up. Let those feelings come and go. And then go back to the inquiry. Do that often because you're interpreting it that way often. So people often say, well, do I have to do inquiry on all this when it comes up? Is what I say is, it's, you don't mind suffering all the time. Think about the energy that it takes to suffer like this. You're not doing it consciously. There's a lot of energy put into suffering. We're training every day to suffer, coming back to it, these stories, these programs, all that energy. And all I'm saying is bring awareness to this. That's all. Your consciousness is willing to suffer this much, putting that much energy to it. Can you bring awareness to it in that way? Literally bring awareness to it all the time with this work. How else would you see through something like this? To avoid this would be the ultimate avoidance. To avoid your being awake to your interior experience would be the ultimate avoidance because, well, it just would, because that's where all this stuff is. So, yes, do it often because you're interpreting it that way often. So, anytime where you're getting tripped up into that inferiority complex, that deficiency story is triggered in each one of those moments. So, reversing in each one of those moments. Otherwise, you just keep believing the same stuff over and over and over again. Okay, I hope that helps. And by the way, when the psychiatrist says face your fears, and that gives you more anxiety and brings more feelings of despair, that's because they're not deconstructing your interior awareness. See, they're just saying go to the party, go to the store. And that's exactly the kind of situation that brings the panic. So I'm saying do that if you feel comfortable, but bring this to inquiry. Either while you're at the supermarket or when you get in your car or when you get home, do this kind of work. And that's really what facing your fear is to me.